Hey, good morning. Today we're going to be talking about how sandwich lease options work. So last week we spent time talking about what is a rent to own, what is a lease option deal, and how they're structured with the multiple contracts that you use to put them together. So this morning I want to talk about and I want to show you some information about how sandwich lease options work. And you might be going, what's a sandwich lease? So think of a sandwich, right? You've got bread on either side, and then you got your meat in the middle. And that's really what a sandwich lease option is. You've got three parties involved. You've got the owner of the property, and you've got the tenant buyer, and then you've got the company or the individual that runs the whole deal. And that's me in this case, or you. And so you're on either side of the sandwich. And so a sandwich lease deal basically means that you are able to put together a deal with very little money down and control the property and make profit from it. So I was just reading one of the comments from one of our students today, and he's got a deal that he's working on that he's got a little bit of challenge in it, which will be interesting to see where that goes. But he put together a deal with a owner of a property, and I call them tired and frustrated landlords, or TFLs. Basically, this owner of the property had trouble selling it, had trouble keeping good tenants in there, and so Kyle comes into the deal, um, who is a real estate investor and master of putting together lease option deals. And he puts together a deal where he takes control of the property through multiple contracts, through the lease options contracts, and puts a qualified tenant buyer into the property and generates revenue from it with a end sale date. So the sandwich lease in this case is the owner, the TFL, who's got a property and they're having trouble with it. Kyle comes in and structures a deal where the owner keeps the property, but Kyle starts paying him rent every month. And in exchange, the owner allows Kyle to put in whatever tenant he wants with a exit strategy of the tenant buying the property after 3 years. So you see the three parties involved. There is the owner, there's a tenant buyer, and then there's the lease option real estate investor putting the deal together and generating money out of this deal. So, just as an example, Kyle will have put $100 down to secure the deal, make it legally binding, and has received 5,000 upfront from the tenant buyer and receives about $400 a month in cash flow on top of the rent. And at the end of the deal, Kyle will also make money when he sells the deal. His total profit projected on this one deal is 58,000. Now, stop and let that sink in for a bit. $100 upfront with a TFL on their property with a series of contracts, put in a tenant buyer, generate money upfront for the 36 months approximate term of the deal. And then when the tenant buyer buys it at the end, makes an additional sum, all combining a total profit for Kyle of $58,000 from $100 down. That is an incredible deal. Now, that is a sandwich lease. So what I'm going to do is share my screen. Okay, so you might be saying, how do you put together these deals? How do you find them? All that sort of stuff. And How do you find them? So basically, I'm not going to talk about the 5 ways that I've done lease options. I'm going to cover just a couple here. And just to get your brain thinking about where there are actually deals out there that you didn't even know existed. So what I just talked about with Kyle was he helped an existing landlord with a headache property. And so that's my example here as well. So basically, the owners were tired of being landlords. They were having trouble selling the property. They had zero rental income. Um, this was truly a headache for them. So, just a couple more points on that. They did have tenants, but they were either having trouble collecting rent from the tenants, or the tenants were just trashing the property. And I think in this case, they had both in this property, and that's where someone else someone else's problem can become your opportunity to be a problem solver and to make some money in it. So this property was vacant. Like they were so done with tenants that it's like it's better to have nobody in there and no income than it is to have a tenant in there who's wrecking the property. I mean, not all tenants wreck properties, but you know, and not paying rent. So they had a monthly negative cash flow problem because they still had to pay their monthly mortgage, insurance, taxes, and keeping the place warm during winter. So I came in and we entered into an agreement, specifically 3 contracts that I had with them, a lease and an option, and one other contract. I gave them a deposit of $100. Now I didn't give them cash. I wrote them a check for $100 or, e-transfer, basically so that the money's traceable, proving that money was exchanged in this deal with the papers, with the signed contracts. Now it's a legally binding agreement. And technically, I was now the owner on paper. I controlled the property through these contracts. Super powerful contracts. When I understood the power of these contracts, it just changed my whole real estate investing career. So I now the owner, I'm paying them rent every month, and I bought it off of them in 18 months. Uh, so I solved their headache. Basically, I started paying them rent right away, even though I hadn't filled it yet. And so I solved their headache. They were super happy. I basically found a tenant within 10 days on this property, and they moved in about a month later. And they had $10,000 to put down and paid rent and all that sort of stuff. So one of the one of the beautiful things about this is just that the tenant buyer is more invested in the property because they've got more money into their rental, which they're going to eventually buy, than just a straight rental. So when someone puts down $10,000 up front, they're likely going to take better care of the property because they've got more money invested into the property. And so my tenant buyers, as a general rule, do better with the property. Plus, if they don't, I've got the 10,000 to cover any expenses I've got. So it's all drawn up in the contracts with the tenant buyers for that. So yeah, so I jumped ahead, but we filled it right away. They put a sizable down payment. They were responsible for any minor repairs up to, well, they were responsible for any repair up to $500. So let's just say the hot water tank went and it's a $1,200 fix. They were responsible for the first $500. Now I've had several tenants, many tenants, in fact, who had this $500 or $1,000 kind of, um, cutoff point for repairs. but they just went ahead and just did the whole thing themselves, right? They got a new hot water tank, or they, you know, trying to. What I'm saying is that they took ownership of it and they just fixed it themselves, which was great. And so on this deal, I made a cash flow spread each month after paying the owner. So that's a little bit more detailed analysis. Well, it's not even an analysis, a detailed overview of how you can put one of these deals together while somebody else physically is on title and has the mortgage for the property. So, tired and frustrated landlord, that's what this one was. Now let me show you a different way to do it. So this is a house that I found that was for sale, private sale by owner. And so struck up a deal on the property. And then what I did was I had investors who were interested in working with me on homes. And so what I did was I put together a pro forma, and like summary analyzing this deal and what the numbers were going to be to purchase it, and what the income was going to be, and what the revenue and the total profit, net profit, etc. So my investors purchased this property uh, essentially for me. Now they were making a great return. So my investor had to come up with the down payment and qualify for the bank mortgage. And then what I told you just previously about the contracts, I entered the same contracts with this investor. So this investor owns the property. They've got the contracts with me. Now I'm um, taking control of the property, and I put qualified tenant buyers in the property. I generate revenue upfront, monthly cash flow after paying the owner, the new owner in this property, what they need to cover their expenses, mortgage, taxes, insurance, etc. And I'm turning a profit while I got another investor to purchase this property. So in these deals, typically the profit, the gross profit on the entire deal is split basically 50-50 between the investor who owns the property and me, who's running the deal with as a lease option with a tenant buyer in the property. And so these deals, in terms of gross profit, they can run anywhere from 30 to well over 100 grand in 3 years for gross profit. So if we're splitting it 50-50, then I get half of that. So it's a pretty awesome deal. And also what's nice about it, similar to the TFL, these investors they own the property, they purchase the property, they own it, and they're hands free, right? The tenant doesn't know their name or number. The tenant, if they've got issues, they'll contact me. I'm looking after the property. The owner on this property is getting rent every month. They get mortgage pay down. They get appreciation on the property, and with a clear and defined exit strategy in 3 to 5 years. So that's another way to set up a sandwich lease. So again, the owner and the tenant buyer is going to be in there, which I didn't talk much about on this deal. And then me putting the whole deal together. So there's 3 parts to this, and that's what makes up a sandwich lease. So I won't go into a lot more detail on that one. Let's see if I have one other example here. Okay. Let's stop sharing. Okay. So that's the 2 different ways that I just showed you now how to put together a sandwich lease option. Now there's many other ways. Like I said on that slide, there's 5 ways that I've done it. um, many times or multiple times. There's 3 ways that I've done it a couple hundred times. And just doing those deals, structuring them as no money down deals, it just really opens up the whole opportunity for putting together no money down deals. And by no money down, I'm talking about $100 plus your time. So your time is worth something, right? Whatever you value your time at, because there's work involved in putting these deals together. But think of it this way: you're putting together a deal really out of thin air, right? You because these deals like this typically are not out there um, as low hanging fruit. You, as a creative investor, put these deals together, and they look like low hanging fruit once you put them together. And that's the beauty of this, is that there are these deals everywhere, right? There are tired and frustrated landlords everywhere who need your help. There are investors who want to invest in um, rental properties, but they don't know where to start. And really, they would just like be able to invest it and get the returns and the tax write-offs that they can on a property, but have someone else look after the property. Those people are everywhere. And so the couple examples I showed you are deals that I found and put together. I found that first property. I don't know what color that house was, kind of colorblind. But it was a TFL, and saw the property. I was even in the property when other investors were walking through the properties, and they couldn't see an angle on this property. Because if you only have one exit strategy when you're looking at properties, you're going to be very limited to find deals. And what I'm talking about exit strategy is, my first rental property was a buy, rent, and hold, where I bought it and I did a little bit of renos like paint and flooring. So it wasn't really a rehab, it was just cleaning it up. And then I put renters in there for long term. That's a buy, rent, and hold. That is a great way to get into the real estate investing game. But what I found shortly after that was I kept looking for those types of deals, and the numbers just weren't working on what people wanted to sell the property for and what I could get for rent. And I got stuck, and I love the deals that I put together. I was at about 5 deals, and I was just getting stuck and couldn't grow my portfolio anymore. So when I figured out how to put these deals together, it's just like it's like a brand new window opened up for me that I kind of knew was no, I didn't even know the window was there. Like it was covered up. There was a bookcase in front of this window. I had no idea it was there. And somehow a little crack of light came in, and I started to move the bookcase by learning about the strategy, etc. And then all of a sudden it's like boom, there it was. It's like, wow, there are deals everywhere to structures down with TFLs. Right, we've got the opportunity with the baby boomer generation who are selling off their portfolio of homes, and they don't necessarily want to sell it all at once because of the tax implications. So you can come in with a strategy like this with lease options in the contracts, and you can help them. You can help them sell them systematically so that they don't sell them all at once. And you might have a property of your own that's underperforming, meaning that you owe more on it than what you're getting in monthly rent to pay for the bills. And that's a very common thing that happens to investors, especially when stuff happens. Maybe you weren't following your numbers closely, or a really common pattern for this is investors excited to buy their first rental property. They get a tenant in there, it goes okay. They move out after a year and they've paid all their rent, but they leave and it's like, holy smokes, like that's a lot of damage. And I only had, half a month's rent for a damage deposit, or the last month's rent damage deposit. That's not enough to cover these repairs. This is like, I got to get a professional in here to cover all these holes. and, sand them and paint them. And there's a lot of stains on that carpet. I need to get rid of that carpet. And what is that smell? So there's all these things that can happen in a rental property. And you've now got this property that you had to put $5,000 into it because the tenant's damage deposit didn't cover it. It happens. It's part of it. So now you're a couple months without rent because you were kind of overwhelmed when you got in there. You started doing some of the work yourself. You realized you needed help. You started paying trades to come in. They couldn't come in the day you wanted them to come in. They need to come in a little bit later. And now it's cleaned up. You start showing it and you get tenants in there. And, so this is a pattern. So then what happens is if that happens again, now you're getting a little bit more desperate because you've now pulled a line of credit on your property and you're starting to max up your amount of money owing on the property. You get another couple months of no rent. And then you get someone who comes by who's got cash and they'll say, really like your place. I'm ready to sign up and I'm ready to sign up today. And here's here's a first month's rent and deposit, or even 2 months rent and the deposit in cash. And you're going, ooh, cash. And right now, solve this problem. Give this guy the key and away we go. And I've seen this happen. It's happened to me once, but I've seen it happen to a lot of other people a lot of times. And they get in, you're happy, you don't hear from them, which is great because they paid 2 months rent, and third month rent comes and where's the rent? Can't get a hold of them. Do a drive-by. Yep, they're still there. Knock on the door. Nobody comes to the door. Or someone comes to the door and it's someone that you don't even recognize. It's like, who are you? Because you put on the lease, the guy and his partner and 2 kids. I don't know. But then there's this other person, another guy who is also an adult that you had never met, is not on the lease. Who is this guy? And you're asking for Bobby, who came in and gave you the cash up front. Is Bobby around? Yeah, Bobby's not here right now. I haven't seen him for about a week. Okay. And you see where this is going. Bobby might be not in the picture at all. And he rented for another guy who had cash. And now you're struggling finding cash. Or, excuse me, you're struggling finding, getting them to give you the rent. And this is a very common problem that takes an excited real estate investor getting their first or fifth property. And then this happens. Now they've got a problem. They've got a tenant in there who's not paying rent. And now how do you get them out? So anyways, could talk about that for a while. These things happen. It's okay. It's just a matter of problem solving your way out of it, or getting someone else to help you problem solve your way out of it. And that's where a tired and frustrated landlord starts, that whole thing. So you can see how this investor was excited to get into the deal. His first tenants were great until they moved out. It's like $5,000. And he gets a second tenant in and they move out after a period of time. Third tenant comes in. You've had multiple months of no rent coming in. This guy offers you cash and you think it's amazing because, wow, this is great. The guy pays cash up front. And then you realize that you really don't have a proper tenant and you didn't do a proper background search because you were desperate to fill it and put somebody in who was going to pay you rent, and they pay you 2 months rent. So now you become a tired and frustrated landlord. So you got to either pull out of that dive yourself, get someone to help you, or what many people do is they bail from the deal. And they'll get the tenant out and they'll clean it up as much as they can for as little money as they can, and they'll sell it at a loss. And they'll say, I'm never doing that again. It's a very common thing with investors, but that doesn't have to be. So if you're an investor who's struggling with this, you can pull out of that curve. There's different ways to do it. Uh, don't abandon the deal and take a loss and say you never do it again, because it's like riding a bike. You want to learn how to ride a bike. You see other people doing it. You see other people who are successful, and you jump on a bike, and first you got training wheels. Hey, this is great. Then the training wheels come off, and it's a little bit wobbly. And then you stop, you get off. You're not sure about it. You get back on. You ride for a little bit more. Wobbly. You get off. You get back on. You ride for a little bit more, and you have a wipeout. And in your mind, as a new bicyclist, you have a massive wipeout because you scraped up your hand and your elbow, and you bonked your head, and you're like, that sucked. I am never getting on that bike again. I'm never gonna pick up a bike again. And so now you're missing out on the joys of bike riding, all because of that one incident. Whereas what you need to do is get back on it, and you need to figure out what went wrong and solve that problem, right? The bigger problems you can solve, the more money that you're going to make. So, recapping, this all has to do with sandwich lease options. So, you're an investor who wants to grow your portfolio but have hit a wall. Either you've got not enough down payment money to buy another property or buy a property, or you can't qualify for a mortgage for any number of reasons, and you want to grow. Sandwich lease options are a great way to grow, to expand your portfolio. I was at 5 doors of traditional mortgages, and I hit a wall. I didn't have any more down payment money, and also the banks were saying that they weren't going to give me any more mortgages. That sucked, and I was like, okay. I remember someone talking about lease options and structuring rent-own deals, and how you can do them as no money down deals, and the cash flow is higher than your typical buy, rent, and hold. So that popped into my mind from some previous studying I did or done. And it's like, oh, what was that? So I started doing research and started finding out about this, started shoulder tapping others who I thought might be doing lease options, talked to a couple different people. Some were responsive, some weren't. Ended up hiring this guy out of Edmonton, and I put together my first lease option deal in 6 weeks with no money down. It was the White House that I showed you on this stream, where I got the investor to purchase a property, and off we went. So that changed everything for me, because now it's like I can basically put together a deal that generates me cash flow upfront and monthly and a chunk of money at the end, with $100 down and a couple contracts, and just putting the deal together. It's like, wow, that changed everything for me. So that's where I created my 6 weeks to rent own cash flow course, where basically it's 6 modules with information all the way through that takes you step by step on how to put together one of these rent-own deals. So, sandwich lease options. You have an investor who owns a property. You've got a tenant buyer who is going to rent to own the property, or they put money down and they're going to buy it at the end, and then me or you putting the deal together. That is a sandwich lease option. Thanks for joining. Thanks for watching. If you got questions, please just put them in the comment field. Love to help you out. Awesome. Have a great day.